Hello, and good morning. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I am happy to be here for the next hour, as usual, to hang out with you and talk about a variety of topics. I have a bunch of stuff to talk about today, and to answer your questions and just hear how you're doing. I hope you are having a good Wednesday and a good week so far. Yeah, where do we start today? Today is a newsletter day, so there is a newsletter that just went out. So if you're joining us from the newsletter, welcome. And I might go over a few of the topics. I have it up on my other screen here, and I can share it on this main screen. I might start with something a little bit lower key. This past weekend, we had a video where my coworker Erica joined me for her top 10 favorite games. If you haven't checked out that video, I highly recommend it. I really like Erica's perspective on games. And some of those are games that you may have seen on my list in the past, but some of them are games that we haven't seen before in any of my lists. So it's a neat list to check out. Erica will be joining me on the channel from time to time to talk about her favorite games, her favorite mechanisms in games that I've played or haven't played. We'll just talk about them. And yeah, so feel free to join us for those conversations in the future. I think we'll do about one a month. That's what we're aiming for right now. So that was fun. Some games I played recently. I played Either Stone on Friday and really enjoyed it. It's a beautiful, how do I want to call it? It's a tableau building game with a dice selection element from it. A dice selection is one of the actions you can take on your turn, and selecting a certain number or color of die can trigger some of the cards in your tableau, which feels really good. And while it feels a little, well, yeah, two-player, it feels very much like a dueling game, but you aren't attacking the opponent. You're attacking these general creatures, monsters in the middle of the table. I really enjoyed Either Stone. I also really enjoyed, one of the reasons I'm wearing a Druid City shirt today, I enjoyed Off With Their Heads, which I played last week. Off With Their Heads is a game where you are playing what feels a little bit like a trick-taking game. You're playing a card simultaneously, in this case, into, again, what feels like a trick, a 4-card trick, I'll call it. And then based on the high card, the low card, and the middle cards in the order, the ranking order of the cards that were played, you are going to do a roll and write type thing where you're filling in one of 3 different mini games based on the card that you played and the color of that card. Really enjoyed my first play of Off With Their Heads as well. What have you been playing lately? Anything fun? We're also continue to play Cozy Stickerville. I think we're 2 or 3 games in at this point, and we're still enjoying that one as well. And tonight is virtual game night, so I don't know what we'll play tonight on Board Game Arena, but I'm open to your recommendations if you have any. Julio is referencing something I do with my podcast co-host Mitchell, where we draw a random bird card to determine what bird they are from each expansion for Wingspan. And you're right, maybe I should do that with coworkers sometime, if that's something that they would have fun with. Background noise X says, I played Expeditions for the first time the other night, and I quite enjoyed it, but I had a question about the boast. The boast ability is the only way to place a star by boasting. The question is the only way to place a star by boasting? Yes. I'm trying to remember the rules offhand. Typically easier for me to be able to reference the rulebook just to make sure, but I'm trying to think of, yeah, in Expeditions, the way that you place a star is by choosing the boast action. So yeah, or not choosing it, but finding it and then using that action to boast about an achievement that you've completed. Tony played Vantage last night. Didn't complete a mission, but we did complete a Destiny and took the win that way. Definitely a win. Many ways to win in Vantage, whether it's preset ways like the Destiny of their mission or anything that you decide is important to you and if you accomplish that goal. Marcus says, I wanted to ask if there will be anything new in the nesting box reprint. No, just a reprint. A reprint is just making the same thing again. Yeah, I guess that's a clarification about the term. You thought you were ordering the reprint and you got the current version. You got a reprint of something that exists. A reprint is truly just a copy of the previous version. The only difference in the current reprint is that it has a different number on the box. It says like maybe 5th printing instead of 4th printing, that sort of thing. But functionally, by design, it's identical. Chad says, loving the new code names in the progress chart. Ever consider making a video giving us an overview of each stage of the chart? It would be interesting to know all that is involved. I'm open to that. That is something that I've talked about in a couple different blog posts. But yeah, I'll show you on the other screen what Chad is referencing here. here is the other screen here. So on the progress chart on our newsletter, we show where each project is in the design process. So yeah, I'm happy to consider that. That could be an interesting thing. I'm pretty sure I may have covered this elsewhere, Chad, but maybe not in the full way that it explains here. So yeah, I am certainly open to doing that. I'll make a note about doing a video about the various stages in a game's creation process. Game creation video using progress chart. Yeah. What else is going on here in the newsletter? We have links to many game-specific newsletters as usual. If there's a recent one, I relink it here. I have Euphoria coming soon because we have the Euphoria Essential Edition coming in a few months. And so we have created a Euphoria newsletter. We don't have any newsletter content yet, but a newsletter sign up at least. Here's a photo of all my coworkers from January when we joined together for the first time in the same place in Phoenix to play test and hang out with each other. That was a lot of fun. And coming soon, we have the nesting box reprint. So that is here for most regions. Some regions it's still arriving or still on the way. And April 1st, we have a surprise locally made product. And then in May, we have Euphoria Essential Edition and the Wingspan expansion. And then, yeah, I mentioned the nesting box up here. We have the disc golf discs back in stock if you're interested in that. And of course, Wingspan Americas and Bordeaux are still in stock. Some of them, I believe there was 1 or 2 regions where we sold out of 1 or both of these, and the restock is incoming. I don't think it has quite arrived yet. I'll check on that on the fly while we're talking about it. Let's see if that restock has arrived. Oh, I can't quite see it due to, oh, here we go. Has that restock arrived? I think it was in Australia that we were waiting for more Americas to arrive. Looks like it has not quite arrived yet, as far as I can tell. Where was that? I thought we did a restock. Here we go. Americas. Nope, hasn't arrived yet. Yeah, took a little while, but it is on the way. So sign up for a back in stock notification there if you'd like. Anything else going on here on the newsletter? Of course, if you have any questions about it, there's all the regular stuff. We have content highlights, best-selling products, some reprint updates, talking about reprints, and just games that I've been playing, things like that. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about that newsletter. Alan says, I'm loving Primal on HBO Max. I've heard good things about that. And Dungeon Crawler Carl on tablet. I have read a few of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. I haven't watched Primal, though, so I'm curious about that one. Right now, we watched recently, I guess the shows that we're watching recently. We watched a movie called Rental Family this past weekend and enjoyed that. That is a movie about an actor in Japan who starts to get jobs where he plays a temporary role in someone's life, and some interesting twists on what that means for different people in Japan. We just started watching the latest US season of The Traitors last night, and we're watching Shrinking on Apple TV and Monarch on Apple TV as well. Those are the things that we are watching right now. See, Kuda's NX got to play Bordeaux at their weekly game night last Friday. The store was having a Pokemon tournament, so it was a little chaotic, but we still enjoyed the new board. I'm glad to hear that, despite the chaos in the store. Papa Patzer says, I'm teaching a board game design elective for young kids. I heard your advice that modifying a board game is a good way to start. My first idea is to play Sushi Go and then make our own cards. That's a great idea. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I usually use Rolling Realms as the example of that, make a realm based on for Rolling Realms, but I think starting with something very simple, make a card for a game is a really neat way to go. You could also even say, like, let's make a house rule, let's make a variant and just see how that plays. And that way, if you already know the rules of the game, it's very easy to test a house rule or variant to see how it works. And that's a good example of seeing how ideas don't always play out the way on the table as they did in your head. James says, any chance of bringing Wingspan or Wormspan to Board Game Arena? I am entirely open to Board Game Arena adding those games to their platform. Yeah, so if they are open to doing that, I'm happy to work with them. I correspond with Board Game Arena frequently, but it's just a matter of, is there a developer on Board Game Arena interested in bringing the game to that platform? Amy, thanks for saying this. Just wanted to say thank you for the Play and Win games you sent us to Captain Con. The attendees love them. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. I hope the event went well for you. Brayfunk says, sorry if my previous attempt double posted, but I wanted to share my excitement for Slay the Spire 2, which comes out tomorrow. That's a big early access release. Slay the Spire 2. They had a long time coming. I'm curious what it will do differently, better, potentially worse. You know, sometimes games regress a little bit on their second attempt. We'll find out. Hopefully not. In early access. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on anyone else who plays that upon early access release tomorrow. 99G-Dub says, which strategies do you personally like to use in Viticulture and Tuscany? Card-focused order fulfillment, etc. The main thing that I do fairly consistently in Viticulture and Tuscany, actually, I'll say two things. One, I try to stay flexible based on the visitor cards. Visitor cards can lead you in a variety of different directions. I am happy for them to lead me in a newly optimized direction, even if I was planning something a little bit different. That's one. Two, I like to get grape and wine tokens in the cellar and on the crush pad early and often, because a little effort early on can lead to a big payoff later, because every year, and oftentimes through various bonuses, especially in Bordeaux, you're talking Tuscany. I'm thinking Bordeaux right now. Bordeaux is definitely more in my mind. But any version of viticulture, because they are passively gaining value without you having to do anything, I think it's worth the effort to get a few of those tokens on the crush pad and potentially in the cellar early on in the game. Jonas says he's been enjoying more Vantage plays and got Stone Saga, and it seems fun. Enjoyed Awakened Realms' upcoming releases video. Anything that you are looking forward to? What am I looking forward to right now? I actually just filmed an anticipation video that went live today. I usually think about, for anticipation, I think about games that I've played recently that I'm excited to play again. Off with Their Heads was on that list. Cozy Stickerville was on that list, and Etherstone was on that list. Those are games that I played at least once recently, and I'm really excited to get back to the table. Paul says, in my opinion, the final round of Origin Story is one of the best late game rounds of any game. Congrats on the production. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, we wanted a big climactic moment where you have a reveal of your superhero. You get to feel really powerful, as I think we would if we suddenly turned into a superhero or supervillain. Can't wait for the new content. Have not played it 2 yet. Hope it's just as fun. I think it works pretty darn well at 2. In fact, for a while, we didn't even have any special mode for 2-player because I thought it worked pretty well at 2-player without any special mode. But we did add the sidekick mode and ended up recommending that for play. It's very simple and easy to play, in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts if you give that a try. Hey, George, thanks for popping in today. Oh, I love the Gorge, Jonas. Yeah, I really, really like that movie. That caught me off guard of how good it was. Background Noise says, do you have the new Scythe and Expeditions dueling game displayed at Gen Con, or will we have it? That is the plan. Yeah, it's hard to guarantee that at this time because it's still, in production right now, but it is the plan to have not just displayed, but yeah, for sale, available at that time. And so that also means that for us to do that, we would have to have put it on our web store about a month before that, which is what we're currently aiming for. Oh, I see. Alan clarifies. It's not Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's Dungeon Crawler, a mix of Claw Machine and Slay the Spire type roguelike. Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah, I have not heard of that. Thanks for clarifying, Alan. Sorry, I misread that. Couldn't tell if it was a typo or not. Christopher, thanks for teaching Viticulture 3 times at your Retired People Thursday afternoon Meeple Club. That's really generous of you to give your time in that way. This time it's Bordeaux, and you're adding wine to it as well. I hope that goes well. Sometimes, despite it being a wine-themed game, sometimes teaching viticulture with wine involved can lead to some pretty long games. But let me know how it goes. Oh, cool. Dan says that Elizabeth Hargrave will be at his local game store, Labyrinth in DC, next week. Will anyone from Stonemaier be in attendance? No one from Stonemaier is anywhere close to DC, but Elizabeth is, and so it's wonderful for her to go there. I think she playtests quite a bit at Labyrinth as well. James says, I won Wingspan this past weekend during a play and win at a convention. That's awesome. Congratulations. It was my first time playing it, and I had a blast. Any info that has already been given out for the expansion? I have revealed a few things in the world of Wingspan newsletter, and I actually might be able to bring that up on the other screen here. Yeah, so in the latest World of Wingspan newsletter, which is archived on the Wingspan page of our website, Finspan, and Wormspan, if you ever want to go back and look at past newsletters without even having to subscribe. But I will bring it up here. Yeah, here we go. So here's the thing that I revealed in the last newsletter. I revealed this image. So this image is from the new expansion that we have coming out in a few months, that we're launching in a few months. So I didn't give any context here. I just showed the image. Hopefully you can see that a little bit on the screen here if you want to pause and take a look at that. But it's also, again, it's on the latest World of Wingspan newsletter. Let me take a look at that. I have some other images to show on the screen here. So I'll come back to questions in a minute. Oh, and one thing I'll talk about, let's see. Let's do some fun. Well, no, this is easier to click to. Yeah, here we go. So I did share at the top of the newsletter, I shared a link to our stakeholder report. We do an annual stakeholder report. If you're watching this video, you are a stakeholder in Stonemaier Games, not a shareholder. You don't own shares in us, but you have a stake in our story, in our journey, in what we're making, in what we talk about, everything that is part of the Stonemaier Games universe. And so every year I do a stakeholder report, kind of showcasing what's going on, what over the last year, how the last year went, and some things that we're looking forward to in the future. And I'll give a brief glimpse of this on the other screen, so you can have a look at a quick look at what it looks like. So here's the 2025 behind the scenes stakeholder report for Stonemaier Games. Talk about how I really try to emphasize this, even though I share a lot of numbers and metrics in this report. None of that really matters to us. What matters to us is, are we bringing joy to your tabletop? Are we serving you? And am I serving my coworkers? That's what I'm thinking about every day. So this is a quantitative way of looking at the year in many ways, but the numbers really don't matter all that much in the end. They aren't what motivates us, basically. So in any given year, if our revenue goes up or down, that doesn't matter as long as we're serving you. In any given year, if we don't add any new Facebook followers, that doesn't matter as long as we are bringing joy to your tabletop. I really want to emphasize that. But it's broken down into a few sections. I have the 2025 revenue and personnel section where I talk about our revenue for the year. I talk about my coworkers here, and a few other details. I talk about why our revenue is a little bit higher this year than last year. We had a lot of releases in the past year. One of those releases was Vantage, which is a fairly expensive game, so it's going to be higher revenue, not necessarily higher profit, but higher revenue. And even with the increased expense of the tariff taxes, we did not increase our prices in 2025. So that just meant that we had a tighter profit margin because we were paying more in taxes than usual. Down in here, I talk about games and prints. Every year I share the current ranking of our games on Board Game Geek, and I share how many units of our games are in print. These are in order of release. And again, I know you probably can't see this on your screen all that well. This is on our blog on the Stonemaier Games website. Here's all the releases we had from 2025. So as I said, it was a pretty big release year, largely because we added the Tokaido brand to the Stonemaier universe. So that added 2 games and an expansion that wouldn't have otherwise been there. So talk about social media metrics here. What's going on here? Some images didn't carry over all that well. Well, I will take a look at that later. Oh, there we go. There it is. This is a chart that emphasizes how the 8 people who run Stonemaier Games are all in service of you being customers, clients, retailers, distributors, and localization partners. We really mean this. Like this is our organizational chart. There isn't a hierarchy here. You are the boss, and we are here to serve you. And talk about some other things that were new in 2025. Talked about the promo birds for Wingspan, the third-party accessory showcase on our website, where we showcase things made for our games by other companies that aren't connected to us. They aren't paying royalties to us. They're just making cool stuff. Oftentimes, they're individual people just making T-shirts or inserts or things like that. We sponsored a disc golfer. I started a podcast with my friend Mitchell, and we stood up against the illegal tariff tax. And I talk a little bit about looking ahead to 2026. So we've already delved into this a little bit. We have the Wingspan expansion and the Viticulture expansion. Those have already been released. The worldwide/online retail release is coming next Friday. And then we have everything else that's coming out throughout the year. Again, you can check that out in detail on the original post. I'll pause on that topic. I'll look at other questions for a moment here, and then I'll go back. I have a question for you that I'll ask in a few minutes. And I also have some photos in relation to the owl topic that I mentioned in the name of today's video. Tim says, Tim says, what did you think of Survivor episode 1 of season 50? Better than I thought, according to Tim. Also binging The Pit. Not quite as light. Yeah, I haven't watched The Pit yet, but I really did enjoy episode 1 of Survivor 50. And the big question that I have right now is, how are they going to fit? So they have 24 contestants. How are they going to fit that into a regular season length? Are they adding episodes? Are they making the episodes longer? Like maybe some episodes where they have 2 tribal councils? I'm very curious to see how that plays out, but I'm really enjoying it so far. Jeff says, I feel after several years in the hobby that I no longer feel embarrassed when someone asks me if I've played a game, especially older popular ones. Did you experience anything similar when you first started, and any advice for new players to help with that feeling? I see. Okay, so like if someone says, "Hey, oh, you haven't played El Grande? Have you not played El Grande or Dominion or whatever game?" I'm glad you don't feel embarrassed by that, Jeff, for sure. But I can understand that someone new getting into the hobby, and maybe someone like when I got into the hobby as an adult, I was mostly playing just a few games. I didn't have a shelf full of games. I hardly owned any games at that time. So I have been asked that for sure, and asked in various ways. I think there are ways to ask that with genuine curiosity. There's some ways to ask it with a little bit of shame involved. I hope I hope we're not asking people in that way. But any advice for new players to help with that feeling? I don't know if I have any great advice about it, Jeff, because everyone is a little bit different. But I would actually put the advice more on those of us who ask someone, have they played a game, as to how we ask that question and how we use, I would say, inclusive language in that way. So if I talk about El Grande and I start throwing out terms like, I don't know, I haven't played El Grande in a while. I believe it's an area majority game. But if I say area majority, you may not know what that means, and you might feel excluded, a little bit excluded if I'm talking about it in a way that sounds like, oh, you should know what I'm talking about. So I think using inclusive language for terminology like that, for acronyms in particular, instead of saying BGG, say Board Game Geek, and explain what that is. I don't know. I think that those little efforts to use inclusive language can go a long way when talking to someone who is newer to the hobby. Yeah. Chad says, how long did it take to decide your Scythe versus Expedition design was going to be a standalone game instead of an Expeditions expansion? Do you know when you'll start talking about it in detail? I don't know the exact time. Probably in like June or July for when I start talking about it. As for when I thought it would be a standalone game, I had brainstormed ideas for an Expeditions expansion for a while, but none of them really got me excited to pursue it until I thought of the idea of making it a standalone game where it was Scythe versus Expeditions, a dueling game. And so I really didn't start actually working on it until then. And so I would say from the start of the actual design process, that's what it was. Thanks, Christopher, for checking out the stakeholder report. It says, great to hear how things are going. Quality does count. I agree. Yeah, always striving for more quality, better quality. Garrett says, you may have mentioned this before, but is there any insight into why Red Rising sold so well and so fast and then tapered off? That's a great question. It did. I mean, it was it was one of our best launches ever. And I think maybe it was related to the intellectual property, inviting a lot of people into the game who had read the books, enjoyed the books, and hopefully inviting people who just enjoyed our games to check out the game. It was a pretty good price. It was an inviting price. Why did it taper off? I don't know. We've sold a lot of Red Rising games in total. And one actual somewhat misleading stat on it. Let's see how many we've sold. We've sold 154,800 units. That's a lot. That's a lot of units of any game. But I think what you may have noticed, what you're referring to, is that year to year, it looked like we weren't selling that many. And I think the tricky thing was, and this was a weird thing that happened with Red Rising, is we sold a bunch of units to a distributor who later asked us to buy those units back from the distributor, which is not something that is typically done in the game industry. But this was a distributor that we were partners with them for a while, and we wanted to work with them. There were other elements to this relationship with this distributor, and so we said, sure, we'll buy these units back from you and then sell them again. So it looked like we basically, and I was of course never trying to mislead someone with these numbers, because we had sold these numbers. But what I potentially could have done, like, I don't remember the quantity, it was a lot though, but let's say it was 25,000 units. When we bought them back, I could have gone back and maybe changed the numbers to make it look like that we hadn't sold them before, because then we were again selling them for the first time in various places. I don't know if that makes much sense, but long story short, it looked like we had sold a bunch of units that we had sold but hadn't really sold until we later sold them. I think that maybe is the least clear way I could have said it actually at the end in the summary. Kelly says, do you now have a shelf full of games? I do. Yeah, I have one shelf that's right off camera here. I have a calyx of a bunch of games. I have a smaller shelf that's full of smaller, lighter games. I have a shelf of opportunity that has maybe a dozen games on it. And I have a Stonemaier shelf that has all 20 plus of our games on it as well. Darren says, how many factions for each game does it come with? How many factions for each game? Trying to figure out what game you're talking about, Darren. How many factions? Yeah, Darren, can you clarify what game you're referring to? Team Evil says, I really appreciate how open you are to the community about the company in the stakeholder report. I did read that you use Miniature Market for your warehouse and distribution. Yes, we're based in St. Louis. Miniature Market is also based in St. Louis, and they have a very big warehouse where we store our U.S. games and fulfill our U.S. orders. I was wondering about how I would set that up with them once I have my game published. Just contact them. Yeah, contact them to see if they have the space, the capacity, if they're willing to take you on. So, and I'm sorry, I should clarify this. They do not handle distribution. They handle warehouse and fulfillment. Distribution is when a distributor sells to retailers. Miniature Market doesn't do that. Miniature Market is otherwise a retailer themselves. So if you want Miniature Market to warehouse, to store your games and to ship them to orders that you have accepted via, say, your Shopify interface, you can see if they have capacity to do that by contacting them directly. Chet says, how's the gaming table hunt going? Yeah, this is one of my topics from a week or so ago. Will it have a cat hammock underneath it? Walter might like that, although I don't know if he really likes swinging around. I think he likes stable pillows and comfy spots. The hunt is going okay. I think currently I am just leaning towards getting a big dining room table because of how rarely we use the surface underneath. And then either just using the table that I have, the Jasper that I have for campaign games, or getting another table, a smaller table, maybe a hex shaped table. I kind of like that look for the inset for either campaign games or for setting up games in advance of a game night. Winter Torrent says, curious what your stance on AI and board game production is. I have talked about it before. If you search StonemaierGames.com for generative AI, not for us, you'll see how I feel about it. I am not interested at all in generative AI in anything related to board games. The only exception to that is bulk balance playtesting. Never to replace human playtesting in any way, but there are limits to the number of times that I can have a game playtested by myself and by our playtesters, our human playtesters. And so near the end game stages of a game's playtest, the only thing I could see us ever using AI for a game would be to feed the rules and components into that AI if it were to stay private. Don't want it part of the general AI sphere. And if within a few minutes, it could pump out 100,000 playtests for balance testing and highlight anything that might be a little bit off about a faction or a card or anything like that. That is the only use case that I'm interested in for generative AI at all. I don't use I don't use AI at all. I think sometimes it comes up in my search results because I forget to put -AI in them. But yeah, I don't use AI and I'm not interested in it. Staffy says, did you ever think about calling Wingspan expansions Wingspansions? Sure, yeah, I've definitely used that term, not officially on a box, but out loud, I've talked about it that way. Also talk about people who talk about Wingspan or love Wingspan as Wingspanners as well. Okay, Darren's clarifying scythe versus expeditions. How many scythe factions? How many expeditions factions? It's a dueling game, so there's one scythe faction and one expeditions faction in the game. And I know people might think of that as just a player mat or a faction mat, but because of these games, it also involves a number of wooden tokens and miniatures as well. And there are other components in this dueling game that I haven't talked about yet. Okay, let's see. Have I considered making a small box card game variants of any of your games, Tapestry perhaps? No, that isn't something that we've thought much about, except for Wingspan. We have revealed that we are making a shorter, lighter, swifter version of Wingspan that will be released later this year. That's the one game that we thought about that for. But for the most part, we like occupying the space of our games being kind of a main event of a game night, not just a quick little card game. The other topic today in the headline is owls. And let me see if I can bring up some photos of this. Because yesterday we had a really fun excursion. Yeah, here we go. We had a fun excursion to the World Bird Sanctuary in just outside St. Louis. We being Megan and I and our friend Laura. A while ago last year, Megan and I decided to sponsor an aviary for little owlets who had been owlets who are abandoned, sometimes hurt, but typically just abandoned in the wild, found somewhere in the wild, and they need a parent to foster them until they are ready to be released back into the wild. And the World Bird Sanctuary has such a parent. They have Archimedes, a male great horned owl who is apparently a very, very good foster father, teaching little owlets like how to hunt, how to survive, how to stay warm. And I'll show you on this other screen here what it looks like, what the new enclosure. So basically, we sponsored a new enclosure, a new aviary for this this fostering to take place at the World Bird Sanctuary. Yeah, here's what it looks like. So this is about half of the new enclosure. They put it away from. So if you ever go to the World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis, which I highly recommend, it's an amazing place to go. You can go meet a lot of birds that are being rehabilitated or who cannot survive in the wild and are just being taken care of here. But this enclosure is a little. You probably won't see this if you visit because it's off to the side because they want these owls to not see humans very often, if at all. They want them to see nature all around them because they are going to release these owlets. If you zoom in here, you can see Archimedes. So we were in this area with Archimedes. Archimedes is the foster father who will be fostering these owlets and taking care of them. Archimedes is very used to humans. He can't be released to the wild. He would not survive. He has a damaged wing. But he is a couple years old and very good eyesight. He just perched there on the ground, just scouting out what this place looked like. And we eventually gave him his space and he started wandering around a little bit more. I think I have a photo showing that. Yeah, here we are outside. So right here is one of the places where the owls and the owlets can hang out, protected from the weather. This is there's a heating pad under here so they can stay warm. Also, though, Archimedes, in preparation of this, I think he knows that it's the season when he might be taking care of owlets. I don't know how he knows that, but he knows. He has been plucking some of the feathers from his belly so that his body warmth can more easily be transmitted to the little owlets that he's going to take care of, which I thought was really cool. Good father figure there. So this is Archimedes on an area of the aviary where there will be live prey in this area. So we can teach the little owlets how to hunt before they are released in the wild. And here is Megan and I right in front of the enclosure, or right outside of the enclosure. This aviary is sponsored by Megan and Jamey in memory of all great fathers. And this is a play on a few different things. Great is a play on great horned owl. And we wanted to celebrate fathers, the fathers of the world, because oftentimes when you have a foster for these birds, oftentimes they are foster fathers who do it. Sometimes the female birds can be a lot more territorial. So apparently the males with birds make the best foster fathers for the most part. Also, it pays homage to my father, who he passed away a few years ago, but he adopted me when I was a little baby. So yeah, it just really special to me to be able to honor fathers and my father in this way. James says, do you so anyway, yeah, that's what I was talking about with owls, and we had a great visit there yesterday where I didn't say this, but we introduced Archimedes to the aviary for the first time. So that was really special to do that with Archimedes. James says, do you think you will continue revealing everything you were going to release at the beginning of every year, or go back to what you were doing previously? I think it really depends on the year. This year, one of the big reasons we could do that is I was very confident that these products would actually be ready in the coming year, whereas we don't always know that. So I think I will try to do it, but sometimes it might be more vague than others. I might not have a specific quarter for that year. And if I think there's any chance that a game would not make it within the calendar year, I probably just wouldn't mention it rather than going back and, because I think oftentimes people hear the word delay and think that something bad has happened, whereas oftentimes it's either just circumstance or something just wasn't ready. And I think avoiding that negative connotation is my preference. Julio says, I appreciate the enthusiasm from fans, but I feel like it's disrespectful for all expansions. Disrespectful to all for expansions as soon as the game releases. Is it disrespectful, or am I overthinking? I don't know if I don't know if I would involve respect in it, Julio, but it has seemed like an odd trend to me for a game to release with an expansion, or to launch on crowdfunding with the ability for you to add an expansion onto it. I think the one pro to that is people like to consolidate shipping. They don't want to pay for shipping more than once, so I get that. But it has always seemed a little odd to me as a designer, because I learn so much from a game by giving it the time and space to breathe and to be out there in the wild. I might have ideas for expansions, but I really want a lot of people to play the game and to talk about it for a while, to think about it, and to give myself time and space as a designer before I put the work in to make an expansion that might not make all that much sense. I think one thing that you might be alluding to is, why didn't you just put that stuff in the game as a module, as a variant? And I think that's a good logic too. That's a good question to ask. Why didn't you just do that? And also, I would say, why did you spend all this time making an expansion when you could have spent that time on like the core game and just get the core game out there instead of also working on the expansion? But I would say that every game is different, every circumstance is different, and sometimes it's just essentially an add-on. It's something to entice people to level up on crowdfunding. I understand that. It just I think I'm the most surprised by it as a designer who knows. I know for myself that I can't. I want to spend all my time and effort and energy into making the core game as fun and functional and balanced and as intuitive as possible. And I don't want to spend any of that creativity or mental energy on an expansion until I've completed that goal and I've gotten that game out there. And after I've done that, after the game is out there, then I might start to think about what could come next, especially to see if the game is even a success, if people want there to be something else for it. So yeah. Matza says, I'm designing my first board game with a couple of friends, and we're at the stage where we want to hire an artist. That's exciting, Matza. So you're looking to not just design, but also self-publish. If you're not looking to self-publish, you shouldn't hire an artist for it. If you're just looking to submit to a publisher, the publisher will not want existing art for the game. Matza says, do you have any tips, advice, and what to look out for when working with an artist? So if you are choosing to self-publish this game, and therefore you're hiring an artist to work with them, I would recommend checking out my blog post on artist contracts. There's the Stonemaier Games blog that you can look for that. But the main thing I would say is to pay the artist a fair amount for the actual art that you need. I'm using my words carefully there because paying them a fair amount, like pay them for the work they actually make. I would not suggest paying artists a royalty. I would just pay them for the work and for the art that you're creating. Since that art would not exist without you having paid for it, I think you deserve the rights to use that art in multiple ways, but maybe leave some of those ways available for the artist to use the art as they wish. And the last thing is I would also focus on, make sure the artist knows how big you want the art to be, because I think sometimes artists work on a huge canvas, whether it's digital or real. And if you're putting an art on a card that's this big, you don't need art that's this big. That's the size of, your wingspan. And sometimes art that is that big does not actually contract well down to a single size of a card. So make sure you convey the size of the final art that you actually need, so the artist doesn't make something much bigger than you actually need. But yeah, check out that. You can check out our website too. I have a bunch of articles about working with artists and hiring artists in the crowdfunding section of our website. Jeff says, since you sponsored an aviary, will you also be sponsoring an apiary? I'm open to it. If there's an apiary in need of sponsorship, I am open to that, in St. Louis in particular. I see some nice comments about Archimedes and the aviary here. Garrett says, could it be a cost-saving measure similar to having upgraded components separating out some design and gameplay elements the base game isn't as expensive? That is fair, Garrett. That is true. That is one of those circumstances where I could see it being relevant, where maybe, for an example of this would be, you design a game that works up to 6 players, but you think that most people are going to play it at 2, 3, or 4. So you publish the game as a 4-player game, and then out of the gate, you've already done the work to design it for 5 or 6 players. So you include a 5 to 6 player expansion. I think that is a reasonable circumstance to include an expansion out of the gate. It's something that I've actually considered myself. We typically publish games that are span from 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 players, but I've toyed around with the possibility of releasing a 2-player version of a game, but you can stack that with other 2-player copies of the game, or different versions, like, different, factions or whatever for a game that it can expand it that way. Typically, it ends up adding too much redundancy between those different copies, so I haven't done that. But maybe if we ever have like just a cards-only game, that might work for that. Kevin says, have you read Project Hail Mary? I have. Yeah, very much enjoyed Project Hail Mary. I think the movie comes out on March 20th, and I'm very, very excited about it. That's one that I will be seeing on the big screen on opening weekend if we can make it work. I think it's going to be spectacular. Beta Wise says, thanks for restocking Gears of Corruption. That is back in stock indeed. Yeah, if you signed up for back in stock notification, you probably heard from us about that. And Damon J points out extras at launch for like realistic resources and metal coins. Yeah, I would put that in the category of like upgrades and add-ons, and I wouldn't call that an expansion. Expansion to me is like new mechanical stuff or more mechanical stuff related to the gameplay of the game. Have you ever been burned out on games? I don't think I have, and I've kind of been surprised that I haven't, but I've certainly been burned out on types of games. But I don't think I've gone even just a week in the last 25 years where I haven't wanted to play a game. It might not be the type of games that I've typically played in the past, but to play a game, that is always almost something that I want to do, that I'm excited to do. I'm open to the possibility. I mean, if I ever get to the point where I'm like, I just am not feeling like playing games right now, I'm okay with that. I have other hobbies. I read, I play sports. Sports are a game too, I guess. But yeah, for tabletop games specifically. Dan says, I really like the annual stakeholder report. Does the process of putting that together give you new insights about the business such that you'd shift your strategy for the upcoming year? That's a great question, Dan, because usually when I do stuff like this, whenever I send out a survey, for example, I would never send out a survey to you and ask for your time if the results weren't actionable, if I wasn't planning to do something with those results. And so the stakeholder report does take more time than most other blog posts. Is it actionable? I don't know. It's a good question, because a lot of it is just putting together data from the past year. Again, I don't care if we made more or less money than the previous year. The social media metrics are interesting to look at a little bit, because I don't know, if I could see there being a future where I'm like, oh wow, no one is engaging with us at all on Instagram anymore. That might change how I approach Instagram in the future, maybe. But if I'm still having fun with Instagram, even if, I mean, there's no expense to me posting on Instagram once a day. So other than a time expense. So I think I don't know. I don't know if that would change much about it. It is nice for me to reflect on the past year, the things that we did, like not the metrics, but in the new in 2025 section where I talked about the new things that we did. It's nice to reflect on that, to think about, oh, what are these things that people resonate with? So that I can think about how we might continue them or do them in different ways in the future. So it is a good time to reflect. I don't know if it leads to a lot of action, but reflection sometimes does lead to action without me intending for that to happen. So Julio says, I was meaning fans asking the publisher for, oh, I see, Julio. I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question. So Julio was saying, is it disrespectful for fans to ask for a publisher for an expansion soon after release? I see what you're saying. And I've talked about this a little bit with Vantage. Like after one game of Vantage, I heard people saying, oh, I can't, are you going to ever do an expansion for this? And I was like, you have seen 0.1% of what's in Vantage. Give it a little time. So I don't think it's disrespectful, but if you haven't even played a game, or you've only played it once or twice and you're already asking for an expansion, this particularly, I think this is interesting because it's coming from a place of love and passion. It's coming from people saying, I love this game most often. Will you make an expansion for it? I wouldn't call it disrespectful, but it can sting a little bit, because you're like, as a designer, you're like, I spent a lot of effort trying to make this game big and replayable, and you've played it once, or you haven't even played it and you're already asking for an expansion. It can feel a little weird as a designer to hear that. However, there are also circumstances where I think it makes sense, because if someone is saying, oh, I wish this played up to 5 players and this only plays up to 4 players, will you ever make a 5-player expansion? That is, I think, a reasonable question to ask. Or if they are looking for something that the game didn't offer them upon the first few plays, I think it's worth playing a few times before asking for something like that. But if they're looking for more asymmetry or less asymmetry, I don't know. I often think, similar to Jeff's question earlier, I think it's maybe the way that you ask it and the context with which you ask it, like having played it a few times before asking for something like that. That can make a big difference, in my opinion. Ernajo says, have you seen any trends with board game art? I would say almost the trend that I've seen is that there aren't any trends with it. There's certainly some artists that we see a little bit more on big name games, but I love seeing the vast variety of art in games. We're seeing, I talked about Etherstone recently. Etherstone, the art in Etherstone is stunning. It's beautiful. Cozy Stickerville has very different art than Etherstone, but it's also beautiful. It's also evocative. I really like the look of that. I see so many different types of art in different games. I think the only trend I would say is that I love that publishers are continuing to experiment with different art styles and applying them to games in ways that just looks unique and great, and it stands out. Mark, okay, yeah, Mark, I'm glad you brought this up. So Mark was very kind. Mark is a fan designer and actually an official designer of some of the promo realms in Rolling Realms. Mark put together a combination or 3 combinations of realms for Game 90, live play Game 90, which is happening this week. Game 3 is actually today, or round 3 is today, if you want to join me for it at 3 o'clock St. Louis time. Mark put together 3 combinations of realms that are likely to score a lot of points, a lot of stars. And so far, Mark has done a great job on that. Mark, we'll see how you do in the final combination today. Yeah, so far I'm averaging over 18 stars in the first 2 rounds, and I really look forward to round 3. Thank you so much for putting those together, Mark. That's been a lot of fun. Kelly says, have I seen Aspens? It's a 2-player game that launched with Deciduous Duos, a 4-player expansion which allowed you to play teams. It provides more pieces and several 100 wooden trees. I'm not familiar with that one, Kelly, but I like you using this as an example of an expansion that went along with the with the game, or it's a 2-player game with a 4-player expansion. Okay, that's neat. So it goes up to 4 players with the expansion. That's neat, but I'm not familiar with it. Julio says, well said, well put. I feel bad when I see comments in the context of them just barely scratching the surface of the game and wanting something new. Yeah, like I said, hearing that as a designer, that feels a little weird. And as a player, I would feel uncomfortable asking for that after either not playing a game at all or after playing it once or twice and barely scratching the surface. That would be an odd request. I would feel odd making that request of a publisher or of a designer. You know what? We're almost at the end here, and I haven't asked you all anything today. Let me do that. One question I have is, what is your favorite game to play with a standard deck of playing cards? A 52-card deck, if you want to include the jokers, you can. So this could be a classic game, but it could also be a more modern game. Some examples would be like poker, hearts, spades, regicide, much more recently. The gang is on the edge because with the gang, you do need poker chips to play. You can't just play it with the deck of cards. But with many of these cards, like Pinochle as well, you do need like a pencil or something to keep scores with. So yeah, I'd love to hear any game, your favorite game. There's bridge, whist. And I'm going to make a note of Pinochle here. What is your favorite game to play that you can play with essentially just a standard deck of playing cards? Euchre, Pinochle, I see. Spite and Malice. I haven't heard of Spite and Malice. I'll have to go back and note these later because I'm going to run out. I'm gonna miss, but I'll make a few notes. Spite and Malice. I haven't heard of that one. Euchre. Or the other ones mentioned here. So spades, nerds, Spite and Malice is on Board Game Arena. Regicide, poker, of course. Rummy, pitch. You do need chips for poker too. Okay, let's make playing chips a fair game for it because the core of the game is the deck of cards. I think we'll allow that. Like one other component is fine. Winter Torrent says, what was the last time you saw a game do something unique and wish you'd come up with that idea? Ooh, all the time. Like every game that I play, I'm like, oh, that's so cool that they came up with that. Like Etherstone really delighted me when I played that recently. And the standout mechanism for me was the dice selection, how selecting a die could trigger abilities on certain cards. You know, it's not a revolutionary mechanism, but it works so well and it's integrated into the game so well that I might say that off the top of my head. But that's what my favorite mechanism videos are for. Like they are highlighting the things in games that I really love. And that I hadn't previously thought of in many cases. Chad says, any new fun Vantage quests you've heard about? Looking for some fun alternate goals. Well, I'm thinking about this in terms of the monthly challenge, Chad. That's the way that I think about this. Not in terms of specifically the quest, but the monthly challenge. There are a lot of suggestions, and I will be selecting one for March in the very near future from a big list of March challenges. Maybe I'll make it St. Patrick's themed or green themed. I don't know yet. I don't really have a direction yet to choose. I see a lot of suggestions here for favorite games to play with just a deck of cards. Oh hell! So are there other names for oh hell? I feel like there are, but Rummy. Yeah, I need to include Rummy on this list. We played a lot of hearts in college. Tong It. I haven't heard of that one. 52 card pickup. Spoon Speed. Oh, yeah. One that we used to call BS. But there are various terms for that one. That's a shedding game. Kaluki. A lot of some games that I haven't heard of before here. I'll mention Tong It. I'll have to research some of these. Canasta. Sure, 2 decks are allowed. I think that's fine. I haven't asked for any news on the Wingspan expansion. I did share some a hint at it in the latest World of Wingspan newsletter that I shared earlier in the livecast, if you want to check that out. So my other question for today, Let's see. Bob has a question. Is there going to be a Wingspan expansion info in this video? There is Wingspan expansion in this video about 30 minutes ago. If you go back and check that out, I shared an image of the latest Wingspan newsletter, World of Wingspan newsletter, where I share a few of the cards there. A lot of solitaire games. Concentration, Mark mentions. So the other question I have for you, and thank you for answering this. Feel free to keep answering it. I can see the comments later too. I had a few other topics, and we had our cookbook club this past weekend where we did cook Irish themed foods. I made a pea, carrot, celery leek soup that turned out pretty good, and especially with some fake bacon. Someone brought some mushroom-based bacon that was very, very good that I really enjoyed. My coworkers right now are at Gamma, the Gamma Trade Show. This is an event for publishers to connect with retailers and sometimes distributors, but it's mainly between retailers and publishers. So 3 of my coworkers are there, or at least 3, maybe 4. 4 of my coworkers, I think, are there right now, hanging out and talking to retailers. Either 3 or 4. Yeah, so that's going well. I do have one last question for you. Oh, and I played disc golf for the first time this past weekend, testing out the old elbow. It felt pretty good. Had a good time playing that. Mattis says, I discovered the Red Rising book because of your game. I'm always excited to hear that. It was such a nice experience playing a board game and then reading about its world and characters. Any other books you'd love to turn into a board game? There are other books that I love, but I think it has to fit a very specific category for me to want to turn it into a board game. I have to really, really, really want to immerse myself deeply into that world. I need it to be a book that is fairly popular, but so that it's bringing in a great audience of its own, but also not so popular that everyone's already heard of it. Like I think, as much as I love like the books from Brandon Sanderson, I don't think I would really want the responsibility of bringing them into board game form. I think that's a lot of responsibility to do that. Yeah, so I can't think of any off the top of my head that I would want to do that with. Otherwise, actually, we would have been pursuing it already if we had. I wouldn't be able to talk about it anyway. President. Yeah, I think I've heard of the card game President. I don't know. I think that one is one that has a few different names for it. Have I played Sanibel? Yes, Kevin, I have played Sanibel. I think I have a recent video about it. Yeah, I have a video from about a week ago about Sanibel. And you've actually picked up shells specifically on Sanibel Island. We used to do it on the beach in North Carolina in the Outer Banks. And I look forward to playing Sanibel with my mom for that reason, because she loves picking up the shells. Oh, nice. Airnaho had an Irish-themed game night. They made Irish brown bread. That sounds delicious, especially with some Irish butter on it. Oh, cool. And Jeremy says that the owner of his local game store goes to Gamma every year, and that they post photos of all the games they see. Yeah, I'll certainly see some Stonemaier games, hopefully in some of those photos. The last question I'll leave you with, in case anyone... Well, actually, no, I won't go to the other question. We're almost at the end here. I see some other questions coming in. Noli Cannoli says, regarding expansions that release alongside their base games, I love the mini expansions modules that come with certain games that expand the base gameplay or allow for more players. And I actually am fine with those. I'm fine with a few different modules. Typically, I don't end up using them all that often, but to me, if that's structured a little bit differently than an expansion, like a module to me makes more sense to include than an expansion out of the gate for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's just a terminology, semantics. And also, have you tried playing a game of disc golf with your non-dominant hand? I have not, but if my elbow continued to really hurt that way, I would consider it. I just know I have so much less power with my left hand. I think I could probably learn to throw a little bit backhand. I've tried to putt a little bit backhand, but with no success. But throwing forehand is I'm dominantly a forehand player. It's such a specific motion. I don't know. I could maybe train myself to do it, but I think it would be very, very difficult at the old age of 45 to try to do that. Christopher Moore's books will never be adapted onto the big screen, but maybe board games might work. What's an example of a Christopher Moore book that you really love? I'll take a look. Am I excited for Brass Pittsburgh? People say that it will be the best Brass version. Yeah, I don't know how people know that yet without having played it, but I am very curious to see what they do with Brass Pittsburgh for sure. Chad says, how often do you want to play a 3+ hour board game? Has this increased or decreased over the years? Pretty rarely. I would say my attention span has never been one to really get into a game that is over 2 hours. There are a rare few games that play for like 3 hours but feel like 2 hours to me, but most games that end up playing at 3 hours feel like 4 or 5 hours to me. So I don't know if that has changed much over the years, especially since I got the most into hobby gaming after college. Maybe if that had happened during college, I might have been a little bit more open to it. Felt like I had more time, but yeah. Morgan mentions the Incarnations of Immortality series by Piers Anthony would make a fun game series. I'm not familiar with that one, but I appreciate the book recommendation, Morgan. A couple of you have mentioned like Peanuts or Nerds. I'll have to look up this Nerds game. That doesn't ring a bell. Well, thank you all for making these suggestions for your favorite games to play with just a deck of cards. We'll see if that's a top 10 video or maybe something that I'll talk about with Mitchell on the Positively Board Gaming podcast. Okay, Dirty Job by Christopher Moore is the pick from I Am Lord Stark. Thank you for the recommendation. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I didn't talk about treat of the day, so I hope you find something to treat yourself to today and something that brings joy to you. And I will see you next Wednesday. Feel free to also dig deep into the newsletter in case you're watching this without the newsletter. I will include a link to the newsletter in the description on YouTube for you to check out. All right, take care. Have a great day. Bye.